So the first thing we want to do is take a look at the architecture of Windows 8.1, kind of an overview, and understand what it is that's part of that makes this into an interesting thing to work on. The first decision point is what type of code you're writing, and you're watching the XAML course. So the assumption is that you're going to build your user interface in XAML, XAML being application markup language. It basically has the ability to declaratively describe what the user interface is going to look like. I can put in things like binding, and I can do a lot of very interesting user interface design work and make it work with my application. Of course, all the logic is going to be in the back end in a file called a code behind file, which is actually a partial class with the XAML. XAML actually is a partial class of my application pages, so tools will create a separate back-end code file. You generally have the choice of doing the back-end in either C#, VB, or even C++. Today I'm going to use C# because that's a language that works well, but you could equally well do it with either VB or C++. All of these things are going to talk to the Windows runtime, and the Windows runtime is where you get into all the services and all of the sensors and all of the other components that make Windows 8.1 interesting. And there's a whole slew of different areas that you can look at with the Windows runtime. Those then are going to interface with different contracts, different charms. So for instance, if I'm looking at the share charm or the search, I can go out and I can interface with that contract, send it data, and it'll send back a well-known structure of information back that I can use inside of my application. And finally, you've got deployment. Deployment of applications at Windows 8.1 is done through the Windows Store. And so there's a whole process of creating an application package that then is uploaded into the store. It goes through the different review and the certification process, but then you can install it into different machines. If you're doing enterprise applications, you can also do deployment using things like System Center to go out and install these applications as well. The tools we use for building Windows 8.1 are going to be similar to the tools we used for previous versions of Windows. It's Visual Studio 2013. It targets the new .NET Framework 4.5.1 and has all the capabilities and components that we need to be able to go out and do that. Now, you might be wondering, well, what version of Visual Studio do I need? And the way that Windows 8.1 is set up for building apps is that if you have Professional, Premium, or Ultimate, you can go out and you can build and edit and create Windows 8.1 projects. That's great. But what if you have Windows 8, an existing app? Well, this will also provide the ability to go and do an upgrade to Windows 8 up to 8.1. And we can edit and build Windows 8 projects, but I cannot create a Windows 8 project with Visual Studio 2013. It's kind of like, okay, well, what's the story with that? The idea is that you can also run Visual Studio 2012 on the same machine side by side with 2013. So if you need to create new Windows 8 projects, that's the way you would do it. Of course, if you are looking at this and you don't have one of these versions of Visual Studio, there is also the Express Edition, which is freely available via download. Visual Studio 2013 Express allows us to go out, create, edit, and build the 8.1 projects and do an upgrade of Windows 8 up to 8.1. But it does not allow us to go out and edit and work with the Windows 8 projects. So that's kind of one of the limitations, but it's also one of the encouragements so that you move to the next version of Windows. If you do want to run the Visual Studio 2012 Express alongside of 2.13, you can do that, and then you could be creating and editing Windows 8 projects there. A quick download link, if you're looking to get the Visual Studio Express, is on bit.ly.com/VSExpress. The other tools are Blend. Blend 2013 for Visual Studio includes a number of new features and capabilities that allow us to work with the design side of things in a really intuitive way, working with vector graphics, working with objects and XAML and markup, and then being able to tie in behaviors and working through the templates and the styles and having much more visual acuity, a way of working with it. One of the things that is in 2013 is that it provides the facility and the ability to create sample data for our applications, which is really, really useful, especially if I've got a rapid prototype where I want to go out and do something. I can go into Blend, go over to the Data tab, and create a sample data based on whatever classes I've already got in my project, or I can just create it from scratch. Another thing that is really nice is in Blend 2013 is when you're editing the styles and the style templates, it's going to do it in the context of the application. So it doesn't switch to a different view of things. You can actually see the changes being applied as you're going through and working with it. You also have extended support for JavaScript, HTML, and CSS in 2013, as well as new rules and dynamic guides. The rules and dynamic guides are often used by designers to create pixel-perfect layouts, and so they have the right amount of space between different things. Being able to go out and set up different rules inside of your project will make it easier to make sure that the actual application fits the look and feel that the designer has in mind. One of the great things about Blend is it allows you to export guides for a particular application and then import them into another tool. So those guides are portable. The same way you'd have settings inside Visual Studio, you can take those guides and then take them onto the other project or another developer machine if you needed to and be able to import and work with that. You might be asking, why would I bother to target Windows 8.1? I mean, what's the big deal? What's new about it? What are the features that I can take advantage? Windows 8.0 was the first release of this new touch-enabled type of an operating system, and a lot of performance things have been addressed to make it respond and be more fast and fluid. The Microsoft guys like to call it buttery smooth animations and immersive experience. So the new features in Windows 8.1 are a pretty long list. There's a lot of things around security, around accounts. There's new screen sizes. There's tiles. We're going to talk through a lot of those things here later today. There's performance improvements. A lot of the XAML controls, like for working with very large lists, have been vastly improved. The number of styles that were part of what was called standard styles file in Windows 8 are now part of the core framework, so you no longer have to load all of those extra things. They're already available. That does a number of interesting things, especially in the designer in Visual Studio, because now we can go out and we can reference those without having to go out and make specific inclusions of different files. The marketplace has some great monetization opportunities, everything from doing advertising within your application, doing purchases of the application, doing in-app purchases. So maybe you've got something that you want to sell as an add-on. Maybe you've got a free version of the app and you want to be able to then have people add on additional content. The marketplace makes it easy to go out and do that. They've got new gift cards that you can actually use so you don't have to have a credit card. And we've got the ability to do a lot more with the marketplace. And finally, by going into Windows 8.1, you can be featured by the store, which it means more eyeballs. More eyeballs means more downloads. More downloads means more monetization, more opportunity to make money with your application. So the Windows 8 APIs that were available when Windows 8 released included a number of different things. You had the fundamental application services and threading. You had graphics. You have communications and data, devices. We've got user interface. 8.1 introduces a number of new things as well as updating existing. Input has been improved. Controls, both HTML and XAML. You've got advanced services with Azure Mobile added to the environment, and fundamentals, things around authentication. There are also a number of new APIs. For instance, point of service, the USB, working with devices through the Bluetooth stack. 3D printing is now natively included within Windows 8.1. So we have everything from speech synthesis, 3D printing, PDF, working with appointments, contacts, a lot of new features and APIs that you can use in your app to enhance the experience. The list of features is fairly long. This is a recording, so I know that you can pause it and actually read through this, but this is probably more than you need to know. There's just a whole slew of new things that you need to be aware of that you can use for building your applications. Performance improvements, there's, like I said, with the XAML controls, there's a much faster startup time for list view controls. You get faster list panning, you get less memory usage in the XAML because the XAML is actually more efficient. In Visual Studio 2013, there are a number of new templates and artifacts that make it easy for building our apps. One of the common patterns that was implemented inside of the Bing app and a number of others was this hub style application where you have a number of different types of information that you want to put onto the screen. In Windows 8, it was actually kind of a challenge to try to do different types of data across a single grid view because you have to be really smart about how you do your templating and all the dynamic selectors for different things. In 8.1, there's a Hub app template, which makes it very easy to actually go out and start doing that style of an application. There's also new app bar, command bar buttons. The buttons are all linked to the core framework, so I have the access to all the different button styles. I can go out and I can pick the image for the button by going through and doing the binding. The app bar and command bar are just much simplified for being able to make sure that the users are able to get to the commands they need with the least amount of interaction, with putting the commands where it's easy to get to. You're designing responsive screens that will react to the size of the current window. You have time pickers and date pickers. You have settings flyout. There was a tool set called Callisto that is now, the settings flyout is now wrapped into the core framework, and it's very easy to go out and create and add as settings. So working with these services, even Windows Azure Mobile Services and other tools, makes it much easier to go out and build an app that's going to be able to connect to the data you need and be able to build a nice application. So let's take a look at what this would be with a new application in the Hub template. So let's start building apps with Visual Studio 2013. On this machine, we've gone ahead and installed all the tools. We got the blend for Visual Studio 2013 as well as Visual Studio. I'm going to go and start up Visual Studio and just create a new project. Now, one of the first things that we look at is, okay, well, what is new here? How can I create a cool application from scratch? If I've got no other code out there and I just want to go out and build things, you'll find that when I create a new project for Windows Store, that I have this new Hub app. Hub app is available in C#, VB, all of the different languages, but it's there in addition to the Split app, the Grid app, and the Blank app. I also have some coded UI test project, which lets me go out and actually automate the testing of our applications. Very nice feature to be able to go out and add to your solution. But if you create the Hub app, what you're going to find as you go out and create it is that it's going to come up with an application that has a number of different assets that have been created for us, artifacts they call them. And inside of here, if you look at what is created, if you've ever created a Windows 8.0 app, you'll know that in common there was a number of different things. One of them was the layout aware page. Notice that's not here. And that's because the layout aware page has been deprecated. It included the ability to respond to the device layout changes, and because of that, the way that the new windowing system allows you to run things side by side and not have to be stuck with either 320 or the full screen or the filled, it allows us a lot more flexibility. And so they moved a number of things into other classes. For instance, you'll see there's an observable dictionary. This class has the ability to go out and create different settings and collections that then can be bound to your XAML objects. The suspension manager class takes care of managing our state. So each time you navigate through different things, if you've included the suspension manager, it'll be able to respond to the load events and provide your app with the data that it needs. Navigation helper is another class that's in there. The class that's probably missing if you've done Windows 8 apps is standard styles. Those have been baked into the actual application now. So if you come down and you take a look at, like for instance, the different pages that get created, you'll find that in the XAML and in the IntelliSense, you can now get to a lot of those settings. The application XAML is the application object. It's the core thing that every page is going to include. So I can create global resources, global things like the application name, and put that in here. If I want to change this, I could call this my test app or my demo app. In the code behind, you've got classes for things that are happening. So for instance, I've got my initialization, I've got suspending, I've got when the application is launched. If I'm in debug, it'll actually attach the debugger and see if I need to go out and enable the frame rate counter. That way I can see what kind of performance am I getting with the graphics on the screen. Otherwise, it goes through, instantiates the root frame, and then creates the object to start our application. And so the type of application that this is actually going to start up is going to be the Hub app, the Hub page. Just come down here, root frame.navigate type of Hub page will take us to that particular application. One of the things you can do inside of here is you can work with the code. You'll notice that going up and down, one of the things in Visual Studio that's actually kind of cool and worth knowing about is if you right-click on the actual scroll bar, go down to the scroll bar options and just take a look at this. You might like it, you might not, but they have this thing called map mode where it'll actually show you kind of what the code looks like. And you can make it narrow, wide, or medium. But the thing that this does is it gives you kind of a document outline, and you can actually see where things are. So when you're trying to find a place in the file, you just go up and say, okay, well, here's my initializer. I can just click there, and it'll take me right to where I want to be. You might have events in here. So for instance, like this dot unhandled exception, if something like that happened, you could add a handler here to actually go out and do some processing. Like maybe you want to throw up a message dialog. Message dialogs replace message boxes in Windows 8. They're still available. Message dialog. Notice I have to do a control period to be able to actually go out and add the Windows UI pop-up using statement. But once you do that, then I can say DLG is equal to new dialog, and we'll pass in the message text into whatever that exception is, and then we'll go ahead and show it. This way, whenever something like an unhandled exception happens inside my app, I can then handle it however I need to. The hub page, which is probably the reason why we came here in the first place, is going to go out and display a whole lot of good information. In the designer, you'll see that we've got a application that's designed out to have a main kind of like a banner or a hero image, they call it, and then it's got a number of different sections. And one of the things in Visual Studio you may be aware of is the document outline, which allows me to go down and see the different sections and rename different things. But as I click through them, you'll notice that the designer is actually going to navigate the designer so you can actually see what's going on, so that I can actually get in here and I can actually interact with the XAML that's there. So I'll navigate it both on the bottom and on the top. Document outline is really useful if I want to be able to go out and say add a name to the section. Like this might be my banner section, so I might call this, hub banner, and it'll then rename the actual XAML down here, so I get the name showing up down below. The hub app, if you run it, we can go ahead and run this to the local machine, will go out and give us that nice splash screen with the X. You've got the frame counter on the top telling us how fast we're going, whether or not we're getting the full 60 frames per second. As I scroll right and left, I'm using my roller wheel on my mouse because I don't have a touch screen. But you can see that I can go back and forth and see all the different items that are out here. I can click on different items. If I select one, I'll go to the item page. Right now, the template out of the box doesn't really bind anything to it. But it's a very feature complete and really resembles other applications that are out there. I can also come back here. Let's go ahead and start this again. One of the things that we have is we have different screen sizes. So what you'll find is I can take the app and I can pin it to the left and right, and I'll end up with a horizontally scrolling content. The default minimum size is 500 pixels. So if I go less than 500 pixels, the size of this gets actually shrunk down. If I have another app open on the other side, so for instance, the mail app, I could be expanding this over so that this is at 320. I can make this a little bit larger. But the idea is that the application is going to respond to different sizes. So how do you make those sizes work? It used to be that we would have to go through and create what's called a snap view mode. In the device tab, which if you go up here to design, is it design? There's a device window. This is very useful for doing design on your applications where you've got the different sizes, because this allows us to actually go through and say, okay, well, am I doing portrait, or do I want to go to a landscape or portrait mode? I can also show where I'm pinned to the right or pinned to the left, or where I'm just in between two other apps. And it will give us the design surface that will actually map out to what that looks like. You can turn on and off the different sizes. One of the new features of Windows 8.1 is that you have a new minimum width option to be 500 pixels, and by default that's what's set. I can also say, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and support the old snap view. Maybe you've got an application that needs that. When I do that, it's going to say, guess what? This app doesn't currently support the minimum width of 320, even though I changed it on this page. I need to go out to the actual application manifest to make the change there. You do that by going over here, double-clicking on it, and this then is going to come down and say, okay, well, here's my minimum width. And then I can come down here and say, set it to the default, set it to 320 or 500. But if I do that and save the page, then in my device, now it's going to get rid of that little flag. So now I can support where I might have my application running in a very narrow left side of things of the screen where maybe you're doing other things side by side. One of the Windows activation features that's really nice is that you can actually activate other windows very simply and easily by clicking the links, and they show up side by side. The other thing that is very useful if you're building apps and you actually are going to put them in the store is to test them on other devices. Now, as an application developer, of course, I have probably about 50 or 60 different PCs that I run all my stuff on. Okay, just kidding. Maybe I don't. I actually have all of the different resolutions that are available on Windows 8.1 by just simply going over here and clicking on my scale. So in the device rendering, I can actually say, let's do this on a 7-inch device. What is this going to look like? The effective resolution is very small. Will my app still render and will it look about right? You can also go to a very large scale, up to a 27-inch monitor where you've got just a ton of room. In this case, if you've got a 500-pixel width, you'll notice that the screen is able to show almost the whole Hub app experience all the way across. So the device allows us to go out and pick what type of resolution you want to do your designs on, and you can actually switch between them and make sure you get things to look the way that they're supposed to look.